as mentioned, I will try to link the future of the strategy to the future of the programming period, to the next programming period, so as to sort of at the same time present what we are planning to do in the coming years, but also how that links into the changes that we foresee in the funding structure of the EU funding structures. This will, of course, especially when it comes to the EU funding structures, be a bit of speculation, because most of the documents has not been published yet, and none of the is that one? Yeah. And none of the negotiations are ready yet. So this will, of course, just be what we know so far. So, and this is the first time I do this specific presentation, so I really hope that it will work out as I thought. Well, looking at the next programming period, the Commission and also the Member States has identified a number of challenges, especially when it comes to increasing the economic output of the European Union. One of the challenges, of course, is to improve access to finance for SMEs. It is perceived as one of the really narrow points in why Europe doesn't become more competitive. There's also a need more generally to increase the competitiveness and sustainability of the EU economy. I mean, that goes without saying, looking at the present crisis, that Europe as a whole is not performing the way it should do and the way we really could expect from it. We also need to be more focused on facilitating the SMEs' access to markets. And this goes both with inside and outside the EU. And here we have the problem that has been described many times here before, that many SMEs come from very small markets, like we have here in the Baltic Sea region, and they have difficulties in accessing bigger markets. And I think ideas like the one we're developing here in the Baltic Sea region, where a first step would be the closest, to expand the home market to a bigger region is a way out of this, but there are also other ways, of course. And more generally, to promote entrepreneurship is very important. Then moving on to the strategy. Just to mention a little bit where we are when developing the strategy. On the 23rd of June, the Commission presented its first official report on the Baltic Sea Strategy. And here we do, of course, see progress in some areas, considerable progress even. New targeted and more inclusive projects, better alignment of funding. Well, that's true to an extent, as we heard today, and as we will hear more about in this session, and also greater policy coherence. But more importantly when we do have this discussion here today, is of course we also identified a number of challenges. And here, foremost of those, is really that we really need to work on better alignment of funding to the policy priorities that we have for the region. And this has been an ongoing discussion all through the day, but really, how do we make sure that what we want to see in the region is also funded from the programs that we do got. There's also a big challenge for the strategy to maintain momentum, and also to make sure that we have enough resources, both in terms of manpower and in terms of technical assistance to really keep the strategy running over time. And it's also, we need to be able to be even more focused in our work, so we need more focused targets for the strategy, and we also need to improve our communication around what we really do. So, coming to the alignment of funding. what have we achieved so far in the strategy? Well, in some cases, in some programs, we have added a new selection criteria. This has, for instance, been done in the Swedish competitiveness programs. It has also been done in the transnational program for the Baltic Sea region, and also in some of the cross-border programs, where they have added a new selection criteria, where projects directly linked to the strategy are then having an advantage towards other projects when selected for funding. We have also seen that we have had some targeted calls in some of the programs for strategy projects alone. We had it now in the Baltic Sea region program, and we have also had it, I think, in the South Sweden program. But again, I mean, there are examples, but it's not a general trend. So far we only have sort of good examples, but we need to make those examples more general within the structural funds. We have also in other funding programs like the European Fisheries Fund, they have included a special chapter on contribution to the strategy's implementation. I mean, fisheries is an important part of the strategy, and it's also an area where it's absolutely imperative that we work together. Also, the European Social Fund has given priorities to transnational activities in their call for projects in some of the countries, Sweden, Denmark, Estonia. And of course, we heard the presentation about bonus, where sort of the territorial approach has been adopted. So, looking forward to the next programming period, because in many ways, of course, it was difficult to make all the necessary changes within a programming period. The structures are set, the programs are running, money are being spent already. So it was difficult to really make any substantial changes in the way that the programs work for this period. But now we were coming into the next programming period, and there we have much bigger opportunities to really include the strategy into the funding programs already from the start. So looking at what kind of framework we will have for the next program period, there will be competitiveness programs. There will also be special programs for SMEs. There will be a common strategic framework for research and innovation. And of course, there will be cohesion policy. And I will go through all of them and just point out where the future opportunities lie. Starting with the competitiveness and SMEs programs. Here in the future financial framework, there will be programs designed to facilitate participation of SMEs in funding programs, and also targeted financial support for SMEs. And of course, we should try to utilize this also to serve the objectives that was described before. How do we get the SMEs into networks that are not just national, but also transnational? So this is something we should really explore in the future programming period. And here I think the question of how to really get the private sector involved in the strategy might find one partial answer at least. Competitiveness and SME program, they're succeeding the sort of the SIP programs that exist today. And the focus is on measures to promote more dynamic and international competitive SMEs. So I think that's sort of could be, as I said, a partial answer to the challenges that was brought up before on how really to get the SMEs involved and really interested in not just their own home market, but actually expanding that home market. So if you then continuing with this, there's also, of course, a big emphasis on access to market. And we're using the Enterprise Europe network, and also promotion of entrepreneurship. And here, this talk about the idea is to create an Erasmus, which, for those of you who don't know it, is for students today, but to create an Erasmus-like project, but for entrepreneurs. so they can exchange and go to other countries, get inspirations for their own entrepreneurial activities. And again, this could be something that could be interesting to explore also in the Baltic Sea context. Then moving on to the competitiveness. Oh, no, that was the same. Sorry, a bit of a mix-up here. Well, then just to conclude that the budget for this will be 2.4 billion, which is quite a lot in European terms, but of course compared to structural funds, it's not that much. I think we move on to the next. Then moving on to the research programs, research and innovation programs. Here it's the idea really to bring together the three main existing initiatives and sources of funding: the 7th Framework Program, the innovation part of the Common Community Initiative Programs, SIP, and also the European Institute for Innovation and Technology. So really it's an effort to streamline, make sure that to reduce the complexity of the funding schemes, and also to create harmonized rules and, again, be more SME friendly. And this will also make it easier to align these funds with the objectives of the Baltic Sea Strategy. I mean, the fact that we then have one big framework instead of 3 frameworks to work with, and the fact that this streamlining is really an important part of their work. I heard a colleague from DG RTD describing it. This change for them is really about making sure that they have this analogy that when you build a house, you should first design the house and then take out the tools that you need to design to build that house, not the other way around. I mean, that you design the house that your tools allow you to design. I think that's quite a good analogy, because it really tells that first we should decide what we want to do and design what kind of results we want, and then we design the tools to get there. I think that is actually a quite good analogy also for what we try to do in the Baltic Sea Strategy. Really put the end results in the center instead of focusing on the different programs that exist. Because I think, to be honest, there is a tendency that the outcome is to quite a large extent decided upon what kind of instruments there are, in a rather unfortunate way sometimes. So, and then continue with the Common Strategic Framework. It's of course a much bigger budget, 80 billion euros. And also there are 3 blocks that are aligned with EU 2020, and of course also the strategy. Excellence in the science base, tackling societal challenges. We had it very much, it's also the base of the work in the BSR stars. Creating industrial leadership and competitive frameworks. So that's the focus areas of this. Then moving on to cohesion policy, which of course has the biggest expected budget, with 376 billion euros, divided into 2 parts: the European Regional Development Fund and the European Social Fund. So, and of course there we are on the 5th of October, we are expecting the new regulations to be made public, and a sort of very important part there is of course to what extent the macro-regional strategies will be an important part or not, but I think it's a bit too early to say right now. But it is very important that that the new regulations are flexible enough for us to do what we want to do in the strategy, and also what of course the different individual countries want to do in their national plans. Then moving on to recommendations for the strategy as a whole. This is the recommendations that the Commission made now in June for how to take the strategy forward. We want to reinforce the integrated nature of the strategy, and we want to align it even closer to the Europe 2020. The strategy, of course, came before the Europe 2020 communication, but now when we got a chance to do a revision of the strategy, we of course want to align it as much as possible to the Europe 2020 to make sure that our actions are also in line with the greater European actions. We will also want to make sure that the European nature of the strategy is maintained, and here we are actually also aiming that important issues, for instance innovation, should not just be discussed by the foreign ministers, but also at the meetings for the ministers responsible for innovation. So that we got a clear link between what the discussion that goes on at the European level and the discussion that we have here in the Baltic. And also that we take up recommendations coming from the Baltic Sea Strategy up to the ministers meeting in Brussels discussing innovation policy as a whole. I think that is very important, because then we get more of a correlation between the strategy and the overall European discussion. We will work to establish targets. We have a task force working on that. And the targets will be delivered now in time for the annual forum that will happen in Gdansk, 24th to 26th of October. So those of you who haven't yet signed up but are interested in strategy, please look at our webpage, which is bsr2011.eu, where you can register for the event. But there we will also present these targets. We will also maximize efforts to align funding with the strategy objectives and strengthen the implementation structures. So looking ahead, what lies ahead of us is that we now are working very much together with the very ambitious Polish EU presidency to make sure that the strategy is updated, that it's revised, that it takes account of the recent developments, and that it is also becoming more focused. I mean, we now take the opportunity to pause for a little bit, look at what we have achieved, look at the achievements, look at the problems, and then try to design an even better strategy for the years to come. And also in this, of course, take due consideration in making sure that the strategy is in line with the future programming period. As I said, we have the task force on targets, ready to deliver within a month. We have the annual forum. We are working to secure technical assistance. I mean, that means that we can fund not just the projects themselves, but also the work that goes in creating projects, the work that goes into holding discussions and so on. And we are also looking into an implementation facility. And this is quite interesting also in this context. Here we're trying to create a project pipeline. I mean, trying to make sure that the ideas that comes up on important projects for the strategy, that these projects are taken from the idea stage to the implementation stage. That means that we support them through experts, through funding, and other ways to make sure that they are not just ideas anymore, that they're actually ready to go projects. We are having discussions with the European Investment Bank on this, and we are also just now conducting a study on how this could be done in the best way, and we are also trying to assess the needs. What are the most important needs and the most important gaps faced today by the people working for the strategy. So this implementation facility, the ideas and the study will also be presented during the annual forum. But I think partly it really relates to the discussion that we had today, really to understand what is not functioning today when it comes to funding, and then trying to find some instruments that will make life a bit easier for people working in the strategy and working in the projects. And then finally, of course, the review itself. That goes on until 2013. I mean, the form it will take is that the Commission will write a new communication on the strategy next year, and that communication will be adopted during the Danish presidency. We have the luck that we have 2 EU presidencies after each other. First, now this semester the Polish presidency and the next semester the Danish presidency. So our idea is to utilize this to the fullest extent, meaning that the Polish will do the groundwork, they will come up with the ideas, and then we'll formalize it into a new and changed and hopefully improved strategy during the Danish presidency. So going into 2013, it will be a new, a revised, more focused, hopefully also more efficient, functional strategy. Because we have, of course, learned a lot during these first 2 years. Things that have worked well, but things that also hasn't worked really as we expected them to do. And that's now what we're trying to rectify by this revision.